you ain't liberating. If you're not invading, you're just ready.
So with that, so in history, Decemberists are going to represent this kind of liberal reform. So for years, all the way through to today, this concept of the Decemberists would be a reform for a kind of a people's rights reform, even though they were basically just nobility. We didn't really, oh shoot. I just forgot to, somebody forgot to put the name on an assignment and I forgot to ask. So it's just sitting there.
It's just sitting there.
And it just hit, oh, I have to do something. And so you see this, in fact, there's a band called the Decemberists, who are known for this kind of tip, and one of the leading members is from Helena. They're actually a pretty popular band. Mm-hmm. They were really popular about 15 years ago, but they're still very popular.
Is it the band you're in?
Huh?
Is it the band you're in?
Yeah, the band, no.
Yeah.
I was already too old to be in the band. So with that, so Nicholas was exceedingly conservative, or another way to look at it is reactionary to the liberal reforms. And his slogans would be orthodoxy in the church, autocracy, which is the complete rule by the monarch, and of course, nationalism. Now, nationalism was seen as a liberal idea at first, but he used it as, don't worry about rights, only care about Mother Russia. And really push that idea. In fact, Mother Russia would be used, they would say it before, but Mother Russia, beginning with Nicholas, would become this very big source of nationalism. To prove you're Russian, you're Russian. So when in World War II, the Soviets brought this out after the Germans invaded and talked about, we're defending Mother Russia in the Great Patriotic War. But it's no coincidence that once he started talking Russian nationalism, it would just be 20 years later where other people within this empire who aren't necessarily Russian start saying, you know, I wouldn't mind being independent, like Ukraine. So with that, France. So France during this time, this was called the Restoration period. I want to say restoring, and I had restoring in my head. The Restoration period. So basically, after Napoleon to 1830. And this is to restore the Bourbon monarchy. So France would become a technically liberal monarchy. The Congress of Vienna realized we can't go all out and go back to autocracy because there would be another revolution. But they were bitterly divided between the monarchists. There was a growing movement that we would dub socialists down the road, etc. They were bitterly divided. Louis XVIII, Louis XVI's brother, would be a constitutional monarch. There's Louis XVIII. And in 1814, there would be a charter of government, which would be a liberal constitution guaranteeing civil rights and the Napoleonic Code. And the big thing about this was, oh, you notice 1814? So they had this charter or constitution. Charter means constitution. Contract is basically what it means. Then Napoleon came back in 1815, so Louis XVIII ran away with the charter. When Napoleon was defeated, they brought the charter back. The people there was the right to vote, to pick your members of the General Assembly. It was a liberal monarchy. But almost immediately, a group of very conservative people called the Ultras, or ultra-royalists, who were desperately looking for revenge, began to gain influence over Louis XVIII. And what did they want? Oh, the leader was Count Artois, who was Louis XVIII's brother, was one of the leaders of the Ultras. Oh, this is the bringing back of Louis XVIII, back to France after Napoleon. They wanted to completely get rid of the royalist ideas, completely go back to 1788, basically. And so, in 1815, after Napoleon was defeated and routed, they began what's called the White Terror. And the White Terror is these ultra-royalist mobs, many of them former soldiers in Napoleon's army from rural areas, rampaged through Paris, killing thousands of people who were involved directly or indirectly with the revolution and or Napoleon. And by 1820, Louis XVIII was becoming more conservative and starting to ignore the charter. So, white, the color white, will become a color that will come to represent in many other countries anti-revolutionary counter-revolutions. And so, for example, in the Russian Civil War, the Bolsheviks will be red, and that also came in the French Revolution, and I'll show you where in a sec. The reds will be the Bolsheviks, and the anti-Bolsheviks will be the whites. Yeah.
Was the white where
Say it again.
was the white that inspired?
No. Good guess. So the KKK was more inspired by a combination, number of things, but the big thing about the white was just scary. Ghost. That's what I came. And why white? That was because of the French uniform, military uniform before the French Revolution. That's why it's white.
I don't think you can keep those white though. I feel like in battle, the uniform would become like dirty, and no longer you have white uniforms.
Yeah, they did. The next day they'd be perfectly white. You wouldn't know how the French kept their uniforms nice and white.
But this is how
Why?
Yeah, talcum powder.
Yeah.
They put talcum
Yeah.
powder, they powder the talcum powder in to make them all look white. And if you hit them, it'd be like a big pop ball.
You playing
It's
chalk ball.
Yeah, I'm all right. So, in 1824, Louis XVIII died, and now his brother, one of the leaders of the Ultras, became king. And Charles X had nothing but contempt for the charter. This was the definition of conservative rule. And slowly but surely, they rolled back the constitutional monarchy. They rolled back the charter, and he became more and more autocratic. And so, for example, voting rights and the power of the assembly went down. Suffrage, the term for this mountain valley. Here we go, there's old Mount Suffrage, right?
It isn't the far back challenge.
Suffrage. Okay, there's Louis XVIII. Does he look, I guess he kind of look like brothers.
No.
It must be
very thin.
And what's going to happen? In 1830, even with the voting restrictions, a liberal majority wanting more rights was elected to the General Assembly. And Charles went nuts. Charles went nuts. And he would issue the July ordinances, which basically said the Parliament was